Don't click stop podcast.
Pero bueno, pues si el programa tiene su cantidad de usarlo, yo ahora no me veo como demando las correcciones y trabajamos con el comentario y esas cosas, entonces me mando su profesor.
I'll be free until
Good afternoon. I think we're just about ready. Are we ready, guys?
Yeah.
I think we're about ready. Everybody here is from UCL, yes? No? Well, if you came from UCL and if you worked in UCL, you would have to, I don't know, how can we describe it? Contend with the challenges of working with internet technologies. It's probably the same as where you work, but it takes a little bit of time to get it sorted out. But eventually, well done, guys. It seems to be working. So I'm not going to touch anything. I've given the promise, yeah? Perhaps all I'll do is switch on the PowerPoint. But I'd just like to welcome you this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming along. We clearly didn't have too many clashes. Nothing on the football. Rugby's not on today. No, that's tomorrow. Okay, so we've got a good crowd. Thank you very much for coming. And we are open data. We are open data. So welcome very much to the first event of the UCL Open Data Special Interest Group. Is that right? Is that what we're calling ourselves?
Yeah, that's what.
Oh no, the new UCL. Was there an old one? I don't know.
No.
With the new UCL Open Data Special Interest Group. Javiera, please.
Hi everyone, and I'm sorry for the technical glitches. I'm a learning technologist, and technology keeps defeating me. So it's the game that we have with technology. If I can find it quicker. The idea of today is to introduce you a little bit on what open data is and how it works for higher education, how we can use it for teaching and learning, and which sorts of activities can be done and which skills can be developed by the embedding of open data into the teaching and learning curriculum. So the hashtag for today is ODSOER. We have to change the streaming link. So if you see someone saying that they cannot see the streaming, please point them at the right streaming link. The agenda for today is, I'm just going to do a welcome and introduction. So little bit of housekeeping. If you hear the fire alarm, please evacuate. We have no test prepared for today. There are two exits for the room, one left and one right. Very simple. And then we're going to start the discussion with Leo. Leo Haverman from Birkbeck, who's going to point us on how open data can be used as open educational resources. William Hammonds from Universities UK, why open data is important to the HE sector. More Robin Dane from Open Knowledge, just sitting there. The Open Data Index. Santiago Martin from UCL Libraries. An extremely short introduction to data mining. Tim Collum from the Open University, using open data as material for learning to code. Carla Bonina from University of Surrey, making an entrepreneurial case for open data. Fabrizio Scorlini from ILDA, the Latin American Initiative of Open Data, to talk about the use and value of open data in Latin America. And David Opoko is making open data consumable. So, and if we manage to get with the presentations on time, Simon Mani will chair us on a Q&A panel. He has a red card and a yellow card to stop us talking too much. So he's going to be our referee for today. So from around 4:15 to 5, we have a Q&A, and then off to the pub, to the Jeremy Bentham around University Street. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Open data as OER. What is OER? OER has multiple definitions. Of course, it's been defined and redefined and redefined since 2002. UNESCO first coined it, and it refers to any type of teaching and learning material that lives in the digital world that can be used and share it with an open license. So it doesn't put any restrictions on sharing teaching and learning materials. It means that any educator anywhere in the world can freely download it, change it, modify it, remix it, translate it, subtitle it, use it and adapt it to their own teaching and learning context. OERs range from textbook, open curricula, open syllabi, lecture notes, lecture casts, lecture recording, assignments, quizzes, tests, video, which is kind of the main shared thing around, animation. But what we feel it lacks in these definitions of the UNESCO and the OECD is open data. Open data is very big at government level, at civil society, but no, the UNESCO or the OECD don't seem to want to include open data in the definition. So luckily, for the newest definition coming up, or just came up a month or 2 months ago, which is defined by the European Union, we'll have the data included into the definition, because data is a teaching and learning material. What is open data? Open data is any sets of data produced by the government, the civil society, scientists, people, that can be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone. One of the key descriptions, or what it defines open data, is universal participation. Means that if the data is correctly licensed, cannot put any obstruction to either commercial use. Anyone, anywhere, without discrimination, can use the data for whatever they want to do. So this is the open data definition by the Open Data Handbook. And the idea is that if we have a set of data, we can make different types of use with that data, including teaching and learning. Tim Berners-Lee says that open data and a change of mindset, so in the way that we use data for different stuff, is the next step in the internet revolution. We produce data. We are data. We generate data every day. As a scientist, as a lecturer, as a student, as a person, we generate the data. So we need to learn to use the data that we produce to change the way that universities and schools and academia connects with real life problems. We can use data sets that give us a connection with the society. So it's a good way to embed open and democratic principles in the university with materials that are free of use, so free of charge. So we don't need to pay subscriptions to get into the world of open data. And who's the next big thing? Leo.
Vera, thank you very much. I'm redundant, you're pressing the buttons.
So I'm just gonna, there you are, come on.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Leo Haverman from Birkbeck University of London, just around the corner. And I'm really just following on quite closely from what Javiera has been talking about in her welcome, because really this work actually that I'm going to talk about is work that we've done together. And it's been on this topic of thinking about how you can see open data as OER and how you can use it as OER. And so really what I'm wanting to do is just kind of frame this conversation about open data with this idea of seeing it through an open education lens. And just to step back a little bit from to explain what I mean by that, what I would say about this is that in recent years we've seen the rise of these parallel open or opening movements around open education, which is, there's been a huge amount about OER, and also even more recently the rise of the MOOCs. There's been a lot happening with open access to research publications, and of course the rise of open data has now become something that's in the news frequently, and people are talking about how this has kind of revolutionized society and everyone has access to all this data, which is great. But but we wondered, is access to this data enough? And we wondered, while these movements are interconnected by drives for transparency, for collaboration, democratization, and citizenship, they, at the same time, rather ironically for open movements, they seem to operate in quite a siloed way, so that there isn't so much actual dialogue going on between them. And so we were thinking, what value is there in looking at open data as OER? Oh, sorry, I've lost my slides now. How did I do that? I just want to click that one. Right. So, sorry. So coming back to that UNESCO definition that Javier showed just before, they talk about open educational resources as being any type of educational materials that are in the public domain or introduced with an open license. And we know that we can legally and freely copy them, download them, adapt them. And they've mentioned a fairly standard list of different types of what they consider to be sort of educational resources. And this is just one, but there are many of these kind of OER definitions that are quite similar from different organizations, and UNESCO are really a key driver in this space. So I think that this is a pretty one that many people take as being gospel on the subject. And so you don't tend to see data included in these definitions, and I think that's it's quite understandable that this has come about, because the OER movement has tended to concentrate on the idea of really two kinds of processes through which resources become an open resource. One being that there's some kind of funding available to create some kind of open educational resources, and then they get created and then they're made available. And the other one is you, as an educator, create some kind of resources in the course of your work, and then you think, these resources are so good that I should share them with other people, and then you release it as an open resource. And what's less often considered is the use of materials, although it's often acknowledged as being that this could be an OER as well, the use of materials which are didn't actually begin as an educational resource, that began life in some other way, but can be used for education. So, well, I think we can accept that this is perfectly valid to think about these as OER. The next bit really that I want to go on to is why would you? And I think that there's some context to think about here. We've got some new thinking going on around assessment. For example, in the assessment for learning kind of school of thought, which draws on the notion of authentic assessment, it's highlighting the central importance of assessment in student learning, and suggesting that assessment tasks should reflect real world practices. So things that people do outside of academia, as well as writing essays or doing exams that tend to be, most often done here. And another interesting thought on this comes from David Wiley, who has written extensively on open education matters. And he talks about the persistence of disposable assignments in academia. And this is quite harsh, but I think it's quite interesting. These are assignments that students complain about doing and faculty complain about grading. They're assignments that add no value to the world. After a student spends 3 hours creating it, a teacher spends 30 minutes grading it, and then the student throws it away. Not only do these assignments add no value to the world, they actually suck value out of the world. So it's a bit harsh. I think you could say students get something out of even these traditional forms of assessment. Let's hope they do. Another person that I would mention on this is somebody from UBC called Christina Hendricks, who's taken that Wiley notion as a starting point for a piece that she wrote on renewable assignments, and that's basically the alternative that she's proposing to disposable assignments. And And so really the challenge there is to think how students can be doing assignments that actually are something that's there to be shared, either with a small community or with a wider community. I mean, it's not necessarily that it everything. One example that's given is often of non-disposable assignments is that students, for example, could write Wikipedia articles about things, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's that prominent. It can be on a smaller scale. I think that also it's worth thinking about these new pedagogic frameworks that are coming about in recent times that are positioning students as researchers or even more broadly as producers of knowledge rather than simply as consumers, and that are focusing the student activity around real world issues as well. And I know UCL is doing some thinking around that at the moment as well. So all in all, I think that these trends or these thoughts are showing that there is quite a bit of potential for thinking about how students can interact with open data and how that could be built into the kind of assessment tasks that they're asked to do. And they could be collaborating with researchers in real research projects. They could be collaborating with students from other disciplines. We could have scenario-based learning activities. It could be that they collaborate with their local community on real problems. So this open data, I think, has potential for supporting the development of various different kinds of skills. Data literacy is obviously becoming more prominent. It's now been recently included into the JISC digital capabilities framework as part of what is needed for being digitally capable. It helps them with data curation and information management skills, data analysis, obviously research, statistics, critical thinking. Also, this can come into working in teams, and also for getting them to think as citizens about problems that are going on in society. And I've got a lot more text than I'm going to say here. We've got some examples of kind of different levels at which students could be developing skills, some of these different kind of skills that I've mentioned in the previous slide. So, and this is all available in a paper that is linked in this presentation in a moment. So for example, if we're thinking about data curation skills, at a basic level, students could just be organizing data sets into folders. At an intermediate level, they could be identifying different sources of data sets and organizing them in databases. You could see the development of, you don't necessarily have to think of this as turning students loose on an open data repository and going, go away and research X. I think that there's a lot of potential for, even for people with quite a limited skill set in relation to this pre-existing, to start using them. We've got a bit more of those. And here we've thought more in terms of all levels, also about undergraduate, postgraduate level. There's the link for the paper in which all of this is displayed. So, so that was, thanks. That was quite a quick tour through the idea of what you could do with open data with students in terms of developing skills. A few suggestions for things to think about if you're going to do that, crowdsourced from the authors of a book that Javier and I co-edited, are here. Don't forget to identify and describe the learning outcomes, the portals that the data will come from, the challenges students might face, provide training materials for the software the students will need to use, and support the students in communicating their findings to local or wider communities. And another final thing, please do download the book of case studies of interesting practice. Two of our authors are wonderfully here, and you'll hear from Tim a bit later. And finally, there's some more further reading there for you. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing more about other people's interesting views on open data. Thanks.
Well, I'm wary about touching the buttons on your laptop.
I'm not using
Oh, you're
slides.
not there, okay.
I'm only foolhardy, but yeah, here we go. But
Can
although
I-
actually, I want to
can
steal
just
one.
double check.
Oh,
the slides are going to be going up where exactly? On our blog post.
Yeah,
Okay.
on a blog post too.
Yeah, so if you go to the UCL blogs or you just Google UCL new open data special interest group, you'll find our page up on there and all these presentations will be loaded up to there. Great.
Yep.
Thanks.
Some reuse. I'm going to keep Leo's slide up there because that's quite handy. You know, it would be appropriate.
It's creative.
Thank you. Yeah, cheers. So anyway, yes, I'm going to do this without slides, but hopefully it'll still work. Okay, so my name's Will Hammonds. I'm from an organisation called Universities UK. We're not a university, but we are the representative body for university vice-chancellors. So we're just based around the corner on Tavistock Square. We're a policy organisation. I spend my day speaking to officials in BIS and at HEFGE, asking them to give us money and to reduce the amount of regulation they're going to place on top of us. But there we go. That's my day job. But the reason I'm here is because of a lot of our work. We're very interested in the way that universities work and how we go about our business, and the impact that universities have on society and the economy as well. And within that, within those two strands of work, open data is something that came to our attention, and is something that we're trying to promote to the sector in terms of how we work and the impact that it can have. And so what I want to talk about is a little bit about the context in terms of what we're working in, and also so sort of it's actually a little bit of a plea when thinking about potential projects with students around open data and what uses and what you could do, is to think about your own institution and how it could be applied here as well. So as I said, Universities UK, we're doing a bit of awareness raising, we're doing a bit of work, and we're doing a lot of work around the efficiency of the sector. We've just published a guide that's primarily aimed at planners and administrators at universities about open data and its use in institutions. It's a data capability sort of document, really. And the reasons why we're quite interested in this is, in short, we spend a lot of time and effort justifying the amount of public investment that comes into the sector. As I'm sure everybody is aware, £8 billion of tuition fee funding is received by UK universities. Now, admittedly, a lot of that gets repaid, but what it does do is it places a lot of attention on in terms of how well we're spending that cash. We have 2 million students enrolled across the UK, so we have quite a substantial public impact in terms of society and public interest. And of course, we also get £5 billion worth of public funding for research as well. So people are always interested in how we're spending this. And what we hope is that actually the sector, through the use of open data, can start looking at how we work. And so things like open data helps promote transparency, facilitates sharing, enables reuse, enables linking between different data sets, supports insight, and fosters innovation. All of those things are good things when we're talking to the Treasury. So we're hoping that open data can help contribute to that. And what we do know is, from work that we've done with people like the Open Data Institute, is that open data has had a real impact in the real world in terms of developing new applications, fostering insight, and they're also saving money. I mean, there's various different examples. If you go to the Open Data Institute's website, they've done a lot of work in local authorities around procurement. It's not a particularly exciting area, but by local authorities opening up their data about how much they're spending on pens and pencils and road sweeping and the like, they've been able to reduce the amount they're actually spending on this by bringing a bit of transparency in terms of how they're contracting. That's a question that we have to ask ourselves in higher education. In addition, things like open corporates, they've brought transparency in terms of how different organizations are linked together across the globe. And there's a great little chart, again, if you go onto their website, around Goldman Sachs's connections around the world, and they've sort of expanded the different countries based on the number of links they've got. The Cayman Islands suddenly becomes very, very large. So those kinds of insights are very important. Similarly, you know, the bus apps that we all get based on Transport for London, that's open data that they've made available. They've released it out into the wild that we get to put into our pockets and we get to use. That's an efficiency saving that, that according to the government, I don't know, you can calculate that down to a few £1 million based on the amount of time you've saved not waiting at cold, rainy bus stops on a Friday night. So all of these sorts of things are real world applications that we've sort of seen and thought, well, hang on, can we get a piece of that for the higher education sector? Because we generate, we collect, and we use tons of data, really. Now, obviously, there's research data. UCL, you know, generates a hell of a lot of research data. It's incredibly valuable. You know, the role that open data can play there in terms of facilitating exchange and sharing and generating research insights, and also replication as well, it's quite important. But the institution itself, I mean, if you think about the kinds of data that this institution is generating, you've got your learning management systems, you've got all your student record systems, you've got your estates, all of these buildings, they have sort of data and sort of data attached to them. You've got your HR systems, you've got your student union, they'll have data about, you know, the different clubs and societies and the rest of it. Even things like your timetable or your reading list, they're all different kinds of data. And we're interested in how those pieces of data can get used and how open data can play a role in facilitating that exchange. And as I've mentioned, you know, government have been interested in terms of opening up government data, and they estimated, well, thanks to Deloitte, that the current stock of public data that's being made available is worth about £5 billion to the UK economy. So we're wondering, obviously it's not quite on the same kind of scale, but, you know, with the data that our sector collects through organisations like HESA, organisations like UCAS, like our own institutions, if we can open up more of that data, can we get more use out of it? And I think our view is that the sector's quite good in terms of being, you know, collecting data and sharing it via organisations like HESA. Within institutions themselves, I think our data capability is it's possible to develop it further, I think it's probably fair to say. But where we really do lack a little bit in terms of sometimes is around opening up our data for sharing. So that's one strand of what we're hoping to do in terms of looking at the role that open data can play in terms of improving the usage of data. The second side is, you know, it touches on this stuff that Leo's talking about here as well. It's around the impact that UK higher education has in terms of skills and economic development. Now, we all know that graduate level skills are in demand, and they're going to remain in demand for many, many years to come. That demand is based on things like problem solving, team working, and using data increasingly into the future. And as part of this, the government has also sort of established its data capability strategy. And within that, they've asked, you know, universities to look at the role of data skills and data training within universities. In particular, the role of the amount of data training and data skills that are in areas like social sciences and humanities beyond the STEM subjects as well. So that's something that we've been talking about. And also, I mean, and anyone who follows the government's green paper around putting students at the heart of the system. No, that was the 2011 white paper, but the green paper is along a similar sort of theme. There's proposals to introduce a teaching excellence framework, and this is kind of highlighting the increased attention on teaching, the way teaching is delivered in the institutions, the kind of impact that we have on student skills into the future, and the role that data can play within that. So both of those two areas in terms of how we work and the skills and the impact that we have on students and wider society and economy, we think sort of are brought together by this open data agenda. And I think one of the areas that we hope that we can try and bring this together by exploring this is the role that we can play in terms of working with students and the data that the sector collects to identify and solve various different problems that you might have within your campus to make the student experience better. And throughout all of our work and throughout the work in the universities, giving students data, we're giving it them at various different points throughout their life cycle. They're getting data when they're wondering about whether they should go to university. They're getting data about which university they should go to. They're getting data about what they're going to do when they get to university in terms of their involvement, their terms and conditions, where they're going to stay. They're getting data about their timetables that, you know, might well change over the course of the term. They're going to get data about where their examinations are. They're also going to get data about where their possible next destinations could be in terms of their employment. All of those areas have potential, you know, open data opportunities within there, but we need to ask people to make that data available. In some cases, it's already open. Things like the key information set about, you know, helping students make their choices. That's available under an open government license. Timetabling data, though, that's another question entirely. Whether that could be formatted in open data, I don't know. But what we're hoping is that by opening up more of this data, having this conversation in the sector, people can start experimenting with what kind of applications could be developed. And we've got various examples. So what have we got? We've got, I mean, University of Southampton, a very good example. They've been publishing a lot of open data from their university. It's things like the menu in the cafeterias, that's going up on open data, and you know, developing apps that students can use to work out what's going on during that week. You know, the location data, the mapping data, that's come through very strongly. Also room usage data as well. Other institutions like Edinburgh are following along a similar sort of path. We already have the Unistats website that's using open data to help students make their choices. It's kind of underused though. You know, are there better applications? Are there better ways that we could deliver that kind of information to students? And so what we're hoping is that by increasing the stock of open data, we can get and using it as an educational resource. You can use higher education, the institution's data as an educational resource, to look at what students might want to do with that data to make their experience of their time at university better, essentially. You know, for them to identify their own problems and try and come up with their own solutions. The people you need to get involved to do this well, I mean, you people and the people who are going to be talking for the rest of the afternoon are much better placed to describe the process of it than me. But planning, facilities, IT services, knocking on their door, finding out what data they've got, whether they'll be able to make it open, and then working with, of course, your students as well. And then hopefully, through that process, you can unlock some of these skills for them, but also work with the university as well and unlock some of the value that they might be able to get from their data, because it's all locked up in someone's filing cabinet. It's barely being used. So there we go. That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much for having me. Okay.
I'm concerned about pressing the buttons on the machine.
Yeah, no, I'll do it.
Can I rely on you to do it? Don't touch.
I'll take blame.
We had a big disaster. Somebody touched the wrong button just before we started.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes, wonderful.
And
Oh. That's it.
one thing that you is it one?
Oh. Yes, this again illustrates a close relationship that Microsoft has with academic institutions. If you try to use a Mac, it all goes a bit wonky. Yeah.
Is that one? Is it? Yeah.
What? Yeah, is that one? Okay.
So,
PDF though. So.
Oh,
Yeah, so I just need to do that. It's fine.
I think so. Well,
It's good.
I'm not touching it.
Cool. Hello, everybody. My name is Mor Rubinstein, or Rubinstein, depending where you're coming from. I'm from Open Knowledge International, which is an NGO from here in England. We actually have people all over the world. Like we have one from Ghana here and one from Ethiopia over there as well. But we spread all over. And what we do is basically helping groups across the world to open data by creating tools and projects which are open source and participatory that people can come and join. One of our nice projects that we're doing is Open Data Days, which is tomorrow. So happy Open Data Day, everyone. And if you want to join us tomorrow at Newspeak House, which is in Bethnal Green, for a big Open Data Day event, which will be on Tax Justice, you are welcome. But I'm here to speak about the Open Data Index. It's mostly known as the Global Open Data Index, but I'm speaking now about the platform, not about the research. So what is that in a way? Can I touch this? Yes, nothing died, right? I'm also, by the way, the community coordinator, but also the research lead last year on this project. And the Open Data Index is basically a tool that collects data about open data. Okay, pretty easy. It helps us to assess one part of the open data assessment. It helps us to understand what data is open and where. GODI, which is the Global Open Data Index, which is this, help us to track around the world. So this is actually from last year. This is 97. This year, in 2015, we assessed 120 places around the world. We call it places and not countries because we have, for example, a jurisdiction like Taiwan or Kosovo or other jurisdiction. And what's beautiful about it is that it's crowdsourced and it's done by volunteers. So we basically put a platform up and we ask people from all over the world to assess their country. But what are we asking them to assess is the following. I forgot the theme, impact. I wonder what it says about my brain. Maybe the impact assessment is hard, but Open Data Common Assessment Framework is a common framework that started in 2013 in New York, and it's basically accompanies the open data movement to the day. And it basically said that we can assess open data on the following 4 pillars, which is context, what kind of political, sociological, economical context do we have of open data in each country. We have data, which is actually publications of data, like what data is being published and how. We have the use of data, who uses it, how, when, many, and the impact of data with the T, because it's really important to know what happened with all of this brilliant data that we know. Like we have, as we heard, estimation of 5 billion, but is it true? The Open Data Index looks only at publication. It's basically really, really simple tool that everyone can use to see what data set was published and where, and it uses for that. We'll get back in a second. It uses for that the open definition. Okay, the open definition is a definition that was created by a group of experts in open knowledge, and it's self-governed, and it describes what is open data. So every metric that we get is we're getting from that. Like data is, means that anyone can freely access, use, modify, share for any purpose. Okay, so we're looking at, does the data exist? Does it in open license? Can they reuse it? Mean, is it machine readable? Is it publicly available? Is it for free? And is it timely? You'll be interested to know how weird it is that it's not timely. But why do we do that? We do this index as a tool for 3 main reasons. The first 2 are actually not about measurement. One is to create a dialogue about open data. We know that when you make measures and metrics, it helps not only student when you grade them, but also government. When they get a grade, it makes them open up and speak about stuff. Sometimes it's a nice dialogue like we had with the British government. Sometimes it's not a nice dialogue like we had with other governments, which are looking specifically at the score. But the idea is to create some kind of a discussion about what we're doing. In the case of the Global Open Data Index, we use to measure, for example, any kind of budget data sets that you have, okay? Or any kind of, you know what, we're in Britain, we'll do the, like one that the British government didn't like. Any kind of a voting data sets, okay? Like any kind, in any level. Then we spoke to a group named NDI, National Democratic Institute. They work with Google, and they find out that in order for data to be really useful for citizens, it needs to be counted in poll station levels, meaning the station where actually someone votes. Who knows what the problem in England when it's come to this data granularity? Who knows? No, you don't know? You don't count it in poll station level. You count it in constituencies. You're taking a couple of boxes and you put them together. That means that for that, Britain will never get, in the meantime, like a perfect score because this data does not exist, okay? Which creates a lot of dialogue with the government. It's actually, for them, it's creating even more digging deeper and trying to understand which kind of data they have about election. Apparently not a lot, not as they thought they will have. So that's something that creates one dialogue. 2 is come to teach users about open data. Like it helps to understand what is open because users come and put input in. And it's at the end of the day, we're getting like this nice project of measurement. Now, the index is something that everyone can have. Basically, we have an instance. We can put it up for you. You can decide which data sets you want to look at, which locations you want to look at, and who will do it and how you will do the review. Like, because it has to be reviewed in a way in order to be published. We're all academics. We all know it. So how do we start? We have a couple of academics group actually in Paraguay, and in Science Po, and in the Czech Republic, and a lot of other places that use this as a teaching tool to show students what is open data. So the first, they teach them the open definition and try to explain by this, what does it mean to be open? Because the questions are always set to be the same 9 questions in all of our form. And the second type of thing is to create basically, this is how the index looks like. It's a bit blurry. But you can see, you can choose which kind of data sets you want to put. and also what kind of places you want to measure. So SciencePol using this, SciencePol, my French is bad. They're using this as a teaching tool in the open data course. So they basically give an assignment to every student to look at a big city in the world, and they measure different cities in the world. So you have Melbourne and Bogota and Maputo, and they're putting it together and trying to basically see if their student understood the open data definition or found this specific data sets that they're looking at. And then they're basically giving them assessment about their assessment. They're reviewing it. They can give them some kind of a feedback through the system. And the system can be basically just booted for everyone. You just need to send me an email and we can make you one of these. And it's been very successful in SciencePol. And it's also been interesting that in Paraguay, they decided to do a different approach, which was to take the global open data index that we do once a year and give that as an assignment to a student. So each student had to choose their own data sets and look at it. And in Mexico, they took a different approach, which they're going to do tomorrow as well, is they're going to each of the, like I think they have like 3 big municipalities that they're going to. They teach them what is the open definition to basically the bureaucrats. They give to each department a data set and they assessing it in. So instead of civil society usually doing it, they give it to government as a teaching tool for them to understand what's going on in their departments. And then they ask other people from civil society to assess the government assessment. It's not always end up nicely, as you can figure out, but like it's an interesting way of teaching what is open data and to see what is open. How we can keep it to the future in many ways. One is, for example, to understand if the data is linked. Second is to try to see if people can curate how they use the data, because measuring use of data is one of the most problematic areas that we have in assessing open data, because it can be from an academical case that is cited, or from a lawyer that decided to take an open data set to court, or from an app. An app is just one use, but there's many others. And then we have also the context, like why was it released and how. So that is from us, and this is participatory. We have a forum. You can always ask a question, add, etc. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We need to load this presentation, so.
Okay, we'll just take a very short break while the next presentation is being loaded. So this is an opportunity to stand up and stretch. If you're sitting for more than 20 minutes at one time, it's very bad for you. But we make the students sit sometimes for 2 hours, sometimes for 3 hours. Take a stretch. It's like when you go on long haul on an airplane, yeah? It depends, because it depends if they stand there and look at this screen, if they look at that screen, it's down here.
¿Tiempo de presentación? ¿Tiempo de presentación?
No, just don't.
Have we touched the streaming?
Yes.
Streaming seems to have gone off.
Something was pressed.
Ah.
Don't close anything,
Anybody monitoring the streaming at the moment?
Yeah, we got it back.
Oh, we got it back. My question was, it depends if the speaker stands there or there. I've got to move the camera.
No, it's
The last
fine.
one was off. No, she was completely off the camera. She was standing where you are.
Ah, okay.
And was
So,
going this way. So
so,
I'm happy to move it.
yeah, I think you need to start.
Oh, it's fine now.
It's fine now. We resumed it. Good.
There's a slight delay on these.
Have you got it?
Let me settle everybody down, I think. Everybody, we're about to reconvene. We all enjoyed that, didn't we? Yeah? If our speakers keep to time, we can have another stretch, another half an hour. It's really good. That'll motivate everybody. But if we're good to go, we're good to go. And Santiago, thank you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. I'm Santiago. I'm working for UCL Library Services, and one of the things that I do there is data mining. I know that's a strange hobby that I have. But, well, here we have a problem because we have only 10 minutes to explain something that is really complex. So I will go to very simple ideas. Data mining is about data, but it is not about mining. Thankfully, it is not. It is more related with computer science and also with statistics. Sorry for this clumsy presentation. It is also related with graphic design. Here, what we use is just usually basic statistics and apply computational methods to have an output that somebody else could understand, not just computer scientists. Data mining is about sifting data. We need to sift data when we have a huge amount of data. And you already know that we are creating huge amounts of data. Data also is very complex because you can have data in many different formats. You can have data that is coming from plain text files, and that is wonderful because it is easier to process it. You can have data that is coming from video, which is coming from audio. So it could be very complex to merge it and to try to extract information from it, because that is the goal of data mining, is to obtain information from big volumes of data. When you have such big volumes, it is not easy to understand what the data is about or the possibilities that data is offering to us. So we need to process it with computers. Data mining is also known as knowledge discovery in databases. Knowledge, well, I don't think so. Remember, we are sifting data to detect patterns on it. Patterns on data are just patterns. It's not knowledge. We can have information thanks to those patterns, and with that information, other people could extract some knowledge. The main goals in data mining are categorization and prediction. Usually, if we want to predict some trend from the data that we have, we also have to categorize it. This will lead to something that is that data mining is deterministic. We are categorizing data. Sorry. We are categorizing data So we are already making decisions with the data. How do we do it? There are many ways of doing the process of data mining. I will now explain shortly what is the most widely used process. That it's called CRISP-DM. It stands for Cross-Industry Standard Process for Data Mining. And it's a cyclic and iterative process that has 6 phases. And here we have the phases. The 2 first ones are really important, and we shouldn't skip those. It is very common that if you have managed to gather a lot of data, you want to work with it immediately. However, if you do not understand the goals of the organization, let's say an organization could be a research group, you are not going to know what to ask. You could be working a lot, and if you work a lot, you probably will get somewhere. However, it is better to understand clearly which are the goals of the work that you are doing. The second step is understanding the data. That is not easy. As I have said, data comes in many forms, and it could present different characteristics that we need to understand it really well. We need to understand the process in which the data has been collected, and with those first stages, then we could be ready to prepare the data. Preparing the data is usually the stage that is more time consuming. Here we have an image that depicts graphically the cyclic nature of this process. Once we have prepared the data, we will create a model that is basically to describe the data and to explain the relations that the data has. And how are we going to tell a computer what to do with that data? After creating a data model, we get the data, enter it into the computer, get some first results, and evaluate if that is what we wanted to have. In this stage, you can see that there are many arrows. As I have said, this is an iterative process. So those arrows are referring to the common movements back and forth from one stage to another. When we are evaluating the model, we could find that we can refine it to have a better result. So it is quite common that after the evaluation, we begin again with the process to refine our results. Here's an example of why preparing the data could be time-consuming. Here we could say several ways to say basically the same. This is a date. The first one is very precise. It has also the hour and minute. This is the less precise one, and all is telling the same. Here, for example, to work with the data, we have to to mix and clean all those different ways to say the same, to have a unique one. Common issues with data mining are usually common issues with statistics. For example, interpreting correlation as causality. When you have a ton of data, it is very easy to find a lot of correlations, and those correlations are not necessarily showing a cause. For example, here, this is correlating in 99.3%. This is the divorce rate in Maine that is correlating with the per capita consumption of margarine. That happens when you have a ton of data. Those correlations, spurious correlations, arise. Here we have another problem in statistics. Is the Simpsons paradox is not about the cartoon series, but we have chosen here two examples. Lisa and Bart they have some homework, and each week they are trying to finish it. In the first week, Lisa has one exercise to do, but she doesn't do it. Bart, however, has 4, and he does 1. Who is performing better here? Is Bart. He has done 1. That's a 25% for this week. What happens in the second week? That Lisa is working more. She has done 3 of her 4 exercises, and Bart has done just 1. So Bart again has 100%. Finally, who has performed better? Lisa has a 60% and Bart has a 40%. So this could lead to problems to interpretation. This is a common mistake in statistics because we are mixing different magnitudes. Some things to be cautious with data mining. As I have said, data mining is deterministic. I have the yellow one. Okay, I'll be very fast now. Let's imagine something completely fictional. Let's imagine that government is taking a lot of data from their citizens, and it is using powerful computers to sift that data with the idea of finding hints about possible criminals. So, okay, we have a problem here because that government is using some specs to find criminals. So we have already determined our answer. If you want to find criminals, when you have a ton of data, you will find a lot of false positives because you are searching for criminals. You will get some criminals. Also, something to be cautious about is privacy and discrimination. You know, data mining is discriminating. We are categorizing, so it is natural for data mining to be discriminating. Also, about privacy, you can have several data sets in which people is anonymized. When you mix them, magically you can have these people de-anonymized again. Here are some tools. The first ones are very simple tools that are commonly used in Unix systems that are really useful for data mining. This one is for getting regular expressions. This one sort is doing just what it says. It's sorting things, and Unique finds unique records. Let's go for simple software, spreadsheet software. That could be useful. Also, a part of data mining is the deployment. You need to do some data visualization. So a very good tool for that is Inkscape, because it works with vector graphics. Very handy if you need to do histograms. I think I need to go. Well, okay. You have this presentation. This last part is just recommendations of tools. So you can download it, and if you are interested, have a look at it. Thank you so much.
And thank you for including the links as well, so we can get the links. See what's on there as well. Do you know which part?
That's fine. Might be able to make it full screen or something.
Yeah, just this laptop's not really friendly.
Okay.
It really hates it. Yeah.
Oh, that's smart.
Okay. Okay. So I'm a lecturer at the Open University in the Institute of Educational Technology. And as the name suggests, we're interested in openness in lots of different forms. But today I really just wanted to talk about some practical examples and experience of a previous job where I used open data to teach introductory programming. So let's see, what's the best way to do it? Yeah, so how did this happen? I had kind of two roles at the University of Nottingham before I joined the OU. One was as a research fellow at Horizon Digital Economy Research, and the other was to teach in the Department of Computer Science. And so the research side of that was really around data in various forms. So how people deal with personal data, how we look at organizational data, privacy, participation, these kind of things. And that kind of fed into then thinking about my teaching practice and how I could improve that. So I was in charge of convening a postgraduate module, which was an introduction to computer programming and development. And that was for master's students, but people who didn't have previous experience of teaching, of programming. So the students would come from subjects like management, psychology, design, doing a master's course in computing, and we're supposed to get a comprehensive overview of programming. And that was quite important in the sense of the target audience. So like a lot of people who kind of get a job like this, I suppose you start to think about how to make it your own, how to make this course your own, how to improve it in certain ways. And my own experience of learning computer programming, I kind of felt it was a bit like this. So you've got the computer as an isolated thing that you're really just programming inside this box. It doesn't seem to have any relation to the real world, the kind of exercises you're given. And those exercises are also really abstract mathematical type exercises, which, you know, in some cases that works for students, particularly an undergraduate who's just done an A-level in mathematics. But it does put a lot of other people off if you start just giving them exercises which have kind of no relation to their interests. So I thought, again, you know, how can I improve this module? Looked at various things people were doing around programming, and there is a lot of innovation around how we teach and get people programming. There's things like Scratch, which is sort of visual programming that's mainly aimed at children. We might look at sort of physical ways of connecting what the person is learning to do with the world. We might also look at gaming, and one of my colleagues was actually getting his students learning to program through creating computer games, which seemed like a nice touch. But it didn't really cover the sort of the problems that I was saying earlier, you know, that I didn't really see that writing code in my experience of learning program had any relationship to the sort of content, the places, and people in the real world. And one way of doing that was really to focus more on files and networking and using the internet as a key part of how we taught people to program. I also wanted people to be working with real world contexts and creating applications that had some relevance, so they could pick it up and say, oh, you know, I might actually use this one day. And I also wanted to highlight the complexity of software development in the real world. But it's quite a tall order to kind of do this with people as they start to learn programming. So there was a tension there about how it was achieved. So I started to think, as I said, you know, I was doing a lot of research which connected with open data. How would those things kind of feed into my teaching practice? One of the projects I worked on, for example, was with the tape. And we looked at how they were opening up their data and making it freely available. And we looked at how you could get more people engaged with that through a project called ArtMaps, which took their data and mapped the locations that seemed to be connected to artwork. So that was an example of the kind of research we were doing, where it was about engaging the public with open data. I also, at a similar time, went to an ODI event at Nottingham, where actually one of the speakers was from the local council, talking about Nottingham's open data and how they were opening it up. So that fed in to some of my thinking as well. So yeah, I started to look at different open materials and how these might fit with programming activities. And I came up with two particular things that seemed, you know, really relevant, really useful. The first one, I did this over 2 separate years, so I had 2 chances to have a go at it. The first one was Project Gutenberg, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is effectively a really large collection of ebooks provided in very simple text format. So, you know, it's all the sort of classic novels that are out of copyright, and you can get them in different formats and use them as you wish. And as I said, I was really interested in doing something kind of local and perhaps, you know, relevant to the students and where they lived. So through looking at Open Data Nottingham, I came across the live car parking data, which seemed like a really interesting one because it was actually, you know, updated all the time, something that had an interesting connection to the environment they were living in. So those were 2 kind of data sets that, as I say, over the course of 2 years, I started to work with. And they needed sort of matching challenges to, you know, connect them with. So in both cases, the idea was that students would produce a piece of software as their largest project, really, over the course of the module. So with the ebooks, we could use that as a basis to get them to produce an e-reader, so an application through which, you know, they could look at these books, they could search them, they could even do some more advanced tasks like finding out which were the most common words in those books, and do that all through a graphical user interface that looked, you know, similar to an e-reader you'd find on your computer or a Kindle or whatever. And with the parking data, this is really just provided in a very simple form, and they could take that and build a sort of car parking monitor application for the local area. And again, this was a graphical user interface, and there were lots of interesting challenges around getting them to aggregate the data, combine it, update it, so download things from the network and things like that, which provided suitable challenges for the level of students. So to start to kind of think about a couple of the reasons why open data really worked well here. Firstly, you know, just even to look at the Gutenberg text, they're provided in a very simple format. It's simply a text file with all of the book in it. If you thought about doing an activity like an e-reader with students without this sort of material, you would really struggle. You'd either have proprietary formats and rights protection to deal with, or you'd have to worry about how this formatting can be, if you like, unraveled by the students so that they could actually make use of it. And again, you're talking about students who really only just beginning, you know, with a month or 2 of programming under their belts. So that was really important starting point is that it's not only openly available, it's available in a really simple format. And then it becomes a really valuable material. So as I say, we got them to create an application that looked a little bit like this. You know, they could learn how to build the interface. They could learn how to deal with the text of the book as data, do everything from sort it, search it, and create an interface through which they could do things like, as I say, look for the most common words, that sort of thing. So it became a really nice material through which they could build something that was quite complex. And I think that the point I'd make beyond that, which is also very true with the car parking data, is that you can, as an educator, you can spend a lot of effort making up really nice kind of artificial examples that you want to teach. But you don't really need to. If you can find the open data out there, you know, you can put that effort into looking for it, and it's real, and it gives you something ready-made to use. So to move on beyond this sort of idea of ease of access, I think the second point that was really important in doing this was the authenticity of that material. And this plays out in various ways. I think at the most simple level, you know, the students are looking at data that actually they would also see in their daily lives. So, you know, this is the same data they were accessing displayed as they enter the city. And they can see that. They can actually be, you know, looking at that data and learning how to program using it. And that authenticity, it's kind of a hard thing to pick apart, and there's various sort of academic discussions of what we mean by authenticity, but it's a really important quality. So as you can see, they're taking that data and ending up with something like this, which is something they've built themselves. And I suppose as I'm running out of time a little bit, just to go through a few more parts of this, it also makes them think about the bigger picture. So software development isn't just about writing code. They could envisage different kinds of systems and the ways that this data was being used. So we got them to think about, you know, what would be a mobile app? What would be a management tool? How would you develop these pieces of software? How would you test them, make sure they work? And again, it comes back to ease of access. So a lot of times in computer science, and I'm sure in other subject matters, you try to get involved with companies, try to get them so that your students have some authentic learning experience. In this case, you've got the data, you've got the ability to get your students to understand what goes on in this organization, how the systems work, but you don't have to have that direct relationship with the organization to make that happen. It also makes them feel a bit closer to being innovators, to creating an application. I mean, this didn't exist, this parking monitor application. There was nothing similar to it that existed. So that really can be seen as driving perhaps a sort of more entrepreneurial, creative spirit in as they're learning. So I think we're running out of time. As Leo said, this is a case study from the ebook that Javier and Leo put together. So if you're interested, there's more there. I just kind of put down 4 steps that I went through, and really that's what the case study goes through. It's kind of this experience of trying to find the right data sets, making sure this is an activity the students can actually do, that there's not going to be some huge barrier that you didn't realize that comes up, and actually monitoring that implementation as the students do it, because there will be the odd things that emerge, you know, from your understanding of this data set that you didn't realize was there at the beginning. So I'll finish off there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carla.
Very interesting. Do you have a ticker now?
No, con
Oh, should I just go like that? So are you still here and awake? So I'm Carla Bonina, and I'm a lecturer in innovation and entrepreneurship at Surrey Business School. I think if I move a lot, I'm not going to be.
We'll keep it.
I have to be here. Okay. So basically, I do a lot of work with open data. I've done work in Latin America. It's one of my passions at the moment. But I'm here to talk more about how we're using entrepreneurial teaching to make a case with open data. And I'm really curious to follow up with you, Tim, because of it's very interesting overlaps. So how many entrepreneurs do I have in the room? You also have to put your hands up. I know some of you are. So this is very interesting because when I ask this to my students, they all think that if you're not like Richard Branson, you're not an entrepreneur, right? And I'm sure, I mean, many of you may change your mind later. But so we hear a lot of open data. Oh, we can do so many good things about it. And so we have so many open data sets. And then we really struggle, as Moore was saying, why people don't use this data set. Why, I mean, this is so valuable. What's happening out there? So we normally teach, we start our entrepreneurial courses with this mantra. I mean, you have to think and build products or services that people want. The people want. And why is this important? Well, basically, because you always tend to think that you have a great idea and a great product, but actually you don't understand what consumers or clients or potential customers really want or actually need. So something that is very interesting for me in terms of open data is not just, thinking in terms of business only, but in terms of social entrepreneurship or certain social business or businesses that can have a social aspect tied to that. Why? Because we talk about transparency, accountability, making trips, more enjoyable, or actually our urban living better. So there is a good connection here. And so basically, I'm not using open data as you were suggesting before, and also the cases that I think William mentioned on higher education, but it's something that we're exploring. I'm going to bring just 2 examples on this, but basically these are the tools that we use in teaching how to think in building these products that people want. Have you heard of any of this? The Lean startups? I see lots of noting. That's nice. So basically, these are canvases. They're both at the extreme that can help you to think, okay, how we structure a good idea, or how do we think in a value proposition, in the offering we're giving to these people, how we understand that it's a need out there. And so these are the key principles we use in the course on entrepreneurship. One is that you need to reach out for facts. So basically, you could do a lot of good reading and think that the customers are going to like this, or everyone, of course, wants to build the Ubers or Airbnb platforms, but actually we just make them work with experiments, right? We use a lot of this Lean startup approach. And we use the canvases that I'm going to show very briefly later to really articulate this hypothesis. And to test, the customers and these, probably fake ideas that we have that, oh, they're all going to love it because this is a great idea. I thought about it. So and then we expect, them to make iterations, or what is called in that book, pivots, and make them work in teams. So this is basically the business model canvas. If you're an academic, especially working in business, you think this is crap because there is no theory behind it. But it's actually something that was also made with a crowdsourcing campaign where lots of people, hundreds of people were asked, what do you think it has to be in a business model? So basically, this helps you think, in the key building blocks that you will have to put in place when developing, this product or service that people want. And something that we focus, that is the other canvas that I show you at this end, it was the value proposition canvas, is even going, zooming in one of the most important parts, that is, what's the key value proposition? So what are you building and for what? And this is key for open data and key for, making at least a business case, as I said, or a social business case with that. So we also teach, how to combine both and use these lean startup techniques. So basically, how you iterate, how you realize that the hypotheses that you build are, more or less true or not. Why is this relevant to open data? Well, this is a case we taught in one of our executive education modules with Surrey County Council. That's what CC stands for there. Part of that course was on digital innovation and business models and so on, which may sound strange for public sector, but it was actually very relevant. So using these canvases, or at least this idea of thinking what your value proposition is, where are your building blocks, that you can adapt. You can think of, instead of value proposition, a public value proposition, and that ties social, environmental, political aspects. So thinking of service that you want to build, and then how could open data help you doing that? What data sets would you need, and so on. So basically, when they started looking at this value proposition canvas and thinking, okay, who are my customers? Well, the citizens. So it was very interesting and fascinating to see, yeah, we're going to release this data, but actually there is no use, or we need to involve stakeholders. So it was a really great exercise to match, both. This was just something we did, well, twice now with 2 cohorts. And the other one is something that we wanted to introduce, and especially in the course I just finished teaching last term, was the master course, trying to precisely engage the students. Hey, you have open data sets. Can you think of businesses or products? They basically had to prepare what is called a deck, so a pitching idea for your product. No one really seemed to pick up the open data thing. So we gave them these, among other resources. But what we're really hoping to do is that for next term, we're going to have also students from computer science. So when you have more coding ability, then I think these may become more interesting. And so that's also, well, a good project, and I'm encouraging, to put that. I have to think in ways on how to really make them work with open data. I would love to make them all work with open data and, bring new ideas or services. But that's, as I said, a work in progress at the moment. These are just examples that we put. So basically, I just wanted to give you, a sense of why, thinking also in terms of what is needed in terms of the ecosystem or the building blocks surrounding the data, the stakeholders, people that you need to involve to really make this open data more usable or reusable or useful is important. Okay, I think I'm done. So thank you.
My schedule says it's stretching time. If anybody wants to stretch, you can have a 30-second break while we're loading everything up. It's good for you, yeah? Well, Javier is pressing the necessary buttons on the machine to make everything work. It's a bit warm in this room as well, isn't it? Yeah, that's why I keep moving from there by the radiator. I can't see the control anywhere. So that's a balanced system.
Pero con el virus se debería dar.
I'm saying you could lay out properly if you've got
The other train line.
Hello.
Hey, all my students stop what they're doing.
Devin do again.
What else can I play
Yes. Yeah. So it's just what they do.
Como
Con la mano.
And I can see it here. Yeah. Okay. All sorted.
Yeah, we just give it 1 sec.
Yeah.
I think we just lost the camera. How are we doing camera wise? Okay. Where do you feel comfortable? Where you are? Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh. No.
And we're sort of on the corner there. Yeah, we're over there, so we need to come down a little bit.
Yeah, but refresh the view because it's streaming, so don't touch anything. That day, so say can I go? Is it right?
I didn't do anything. I swear I didn't do anything. No, it wasn't me. It's me here. I can see myself.
Yeah, that's moving. That's moving. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all
Good.
fine.
Yeah.
Very, very
Good.
wide angle.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's all fine.
That's you're okay. Everybody comfy, more or less? Okay. Sorry. Hang on.
So I can introduce myself. I'm Fabrizio
Fabrizio.
Scorini. Yeah, well done. I'm Fabrizio Scorini from the Latin American Open Data Initiative. That's our logo and the website. So first disclaimer, what ILDE does, basically we run applied research in Latin America, exploring basically the use of open data in this region and reflecting about the consequences of this use. As you can see, we have a bunch of organizations involved here, so I'm just going to name 3 of them, maybe 5 because the funders are also important. So, so we have 3 executing agencies, Fundación Avina, who basically supports the research endeavor which I am carrying out, and the researcher there. The Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. This is a UN agency that essentially is fostering policy dialogue about this, as well as the Organization of American States. And we're generally funded by the International Development Research Center, IDRC, in Canada. So yes, all the institutional things are now said. So what I'm here today to tell you basically is to show some examples, some stories from this region about how people and organizations are using open data and connecting with the theme of this meeting, which is around open educational resources. So first point I would like to make, there is this thing about if a tree falls and nobody's there to watch, did it actually happen? And who things actually happen? Realist around the room? No. Might have happened, might not have happened. The same goes a bit with data. If you publish data, no one actually uses that. Well, is it there? Maybe it's not. I mean, it's just it's just something lying there in the internet. And kind of reflecting on that. This is a recent campaign activists in Latin America are now launching, which is the 10 Commandments of Open Data. It's pretty useful, very Catholic content. So we and this is a good friend of mine saying like, well, you will publish the data that the people demands, this is the relevance about publishing important data sets that you can use, data sets that you can sort of reflect the priorities of your town, of your country, of your region. So that's the reason why sometimes people, have these fairy tales about open data in the, developed north, and somehow those fairy tales just doesn't work down there. But that can also work the other way around. Basically, people in this context actually have their own worries, and that can also lead to learning and to use of data. So I got 2 examples, and you will do stuff that actually the people want. So one thing that's crucial in Latin America, one of the main problems, I think is a global issue, but I will take it from what I know, which is that the region is health service delivery. I mean, when is your doctor actually getting to see you? How long will it take for you to get an appointment? The time frame, the cost of the tickets that you need to get to access, and the drugs that you get prescribed, and so on. So this example here is one of our strategic initiatives. We call it sort of learning exercise. We deployed with Data Uruguay, which is an NGO back home, and the Ministry of Health. And the Ministry of Health in Uruguay basically used to publish these data sets about all these important things about health for a while in very dodgy Excel sheets, 10 or 15 clicks away from you. And those dodgy Excel sheets were crucial because this is information you needed at a very particular point of time in which you could exercise the right to change your provider. So in Uruguay, we are all essentially able to do that, but it's in a very short time frame. So you have 30 days every year. And the only way to make an informed decision, if you want, was actually looking at those spreadsheets. So through the, this actually took a sort of evolution from activists, gathering this data and setting up an initial website trying to analyze that, to a partnerships between civil society and government to build this website, which now is used by 50,000 people to essentially make an informed choice, which the choice could be actually stay. They might be perfectly happy where they are, but they're now able to compare around 300 data points here. So what you see here, obviously, is just a small summary, but if you go into the website, you will be able to compare a lot of the performance in terms of health service delivery of these institutions, as well as the infrastructure and where do they have their clinic and so on. And there's much more that can be done. But the crucial thing of this application, of this use of open data, what shows you is that the system is now more transparent. So the providers are now displaying more information. As a result, that this information is public. It certainly affected the behavior of the providers. Evidence in this third year shows that providers are not that inclined to charge the maximum anymore because someone might be looking at it. Like more exactly, 50,000 people are going to look at it. And actually, they are providing data. For years, actually, the ministry struggled to get data out of the providers because they were not very interested in being transparent. And so, as a result, actually empower the regulator of this system. So this is a beautiful story, if you want, one of our little gems. But that said, we have other, and connected to education as well, with this sort of exercise of comparing things. And this is a Mexican website, which essentially allows you to compare your school. Compare, o mejora tu escuela is the name in Spanish. Improve your school will be. What it allows you to do is get data about your local school, how it is performing, and so on. And there are other websites in the region in Brazil that do the same thing, but they had to struggle a bit more. This was not a partnership. They actually went for the data. They had to do all sorts of processes to get data out and to build this website. So that leads us to the road to heaven of open data might be a bit complicated. So I was telling you this beautiful story about Datu Servicio, and then I tell you this very interesting story about this school. But to get to this heaven of open dataness, if you want, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort to do that. So, for instance, like you won't publish impure data, right? And this is the story behind these poor guys in Mexico. They had to do all these things to get the data out. And crucially, they don't get the data essentially in a timely and regular fashion. So to update this data, it's impossible. A complex problem. So, well, one does not simply do open data, right? The problem here is that people tend to assume that if you release it, this just will happen. And unfortunately, it's not, at least in our experience from the evidence we have, it's just not going to do that. But that said, there is room for mixing communities, and it is particularly, we heard here before of these open communities not connecting to each other, and I think this is a perfect example of how the civic tech movement, as people call it, essentially these civic hackers or civic entrepreneurs that essentially go and build new things, and the open data movement, people through things actually connect. And they can create new things. And I think this is one of the most powerful, and as Carla was saying, this is one of the most powerful synergies that you can find in order to take open data to the next level, if you want. Or that's what people seems to be actually doing successfully up to a point. So to do that, you need communities, diverse communities. This is a picture from AbreLatam and Condatos, which is our regional event where people just gather and do stuff. And this is an unconference, basically. So we don't like very formal settings because you need to work a lot. And formal settings just get people sitting and listening. Okay, I don't know if you can reflect on that a bit, but we try to do that so people can have a go and maybe do the speaking thing as I am doing now. But the crucial bit though is to engage diverse audiences to build new things. And that has been part of the learning we have in Latin America. So connections, this is the idea to build new things. This is not necessarily about data, it's about people and people connecting to build new stuff, to essentially engage in new ways. Right, so engaging, right? So we need to engage. So and this is a perfect setting to engage. I mean, this is actually about open data and open educational resources. And we need to know how open data as an open infrastructure can serve the open education community better. And so we need to build new tools, essentially for the open education community to reach out to more people. So my view here is more like an open infrastructure, data serving as an open infrastructure for others to take it further. And one single word on techno-utopia and frictionless data. So it's not going to happen without people. It's going to be messy, it's going to be complex, and it's not going to be frictionless. I mean, there's no way, at least in our experience, that frictionless data is going to evolve out of here, because there's always friction. Even in the perfect world that I showed you at the beginning, data was wrong. People had complaints, and they were sorted. So there was friction, and friction is good. Conflict is good sometimes. You get things out of that. So the future might look a bit more like this. OLPC, this is a very famous program in Uruguay, 1 laptop per child. And so educators around the table trying to, improve the way they teach, using these computers with an aim, which is crucial, which is to develop their students. And I think that's the goal, and that's where open data can fit nicely into, but not the other way around. You don't depart from the data to essentially engage your students. You engage with your students and then use data for that, which I think your example was beautiful in terms of that. So yeah, that's us. That's us. With this nice picture of the Andes, I'm finished. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, we have a bonus track. Kindly, David joined us yesterday, and it's brilliant to have him here. He works for Open Data for Development. And yeah, so we decided to add an extra chair on the panel because I'm really happy that you managed to be in London at this time, and welcome. Let's see if I can, is it there? Right, thank you, David.
How many minutes do I have?
10 plus 5.
Okay, all right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. I think it's the last one because I think everything I'm going to say has already been summarized, and so I'm just going to wrap it up in a few minutes. So my name is David Selassie Opoku. I work in Accra, Ghana. I am from Ghana. I'm part of Open Knowledge International, where Moore is actually part of. And my job is to kind of travel across the continent of Africa and figure out what work is happening in open data, what is working, what is not. And some of that involves working with data journalists, civil society organizations. And I decided to call this talk Making Open Data Consumable. And the reason why I wanted to do that was because there is an open data rush. And that is, everybody's talking about open data, benefits that it brings. In terms of being able to develop applications, we are opening up a lot of data, and that's really exciting. But there tends to be a problem. Who is consuming this data? We have citizens who are supposed to use this data to inform their decisions, right? We have entrepreneurs who are supposed to come up with new business models to drive businesses. We have journalists who are supposed to tell stories, to have an impact, to engage citizenry, to question government. And we have civil society organizations who are supposed to use this data to identify issues that people really care about. The problem, though, is that there's a gap, right? We're producing all this data, but then is it consumable? Is it accessible? Do the people who are supposed to use it have the skills to utilize it in the way that matters? And this is what we actually worry about as a project part of Open Knowledge called the School of Data. What the School of Data is doing is focusing on empowering civil society organizations, journalists and citizens, and how to use data effectively. We don't want necessarily to make everybody an expert in data, but we want to give them an appetite of what it means to be data savvy. We want to give them an introduction into being able to use data for whatever matters to them. And the way we do this is by releasing a lot of learning resources that is very easy for anyone who is interested in utilizing data for their work. So you can go online to a website and you can learn about what is data, why open data, what is all this talk, but then begin to learn simple skills that allow you to take open data that is made available and be able to analyze it and turn it into things that actually matter to you. So if you are going to be looking at which school in your jurisdiction or your community is the best performing, there is some element of analysis or comparison that you have to do. And the assumption that everybody can actually do that easily sometimes may be right or may be wrong. And we want to fix that. We also do that by creating a network of people who are doing different things all across the world. So ILDA is one of the people that we engage with, but trying to build a network that eventually understands context in open data and is able to make it relevant to the people who actually want to utilize it for the work that they do. And then we also have a global fellowship program. So last year I was a School of Data fellow in Accra, Ghana. And what that meant was basically engaging with different players in the space, organizing workshops, and really seeing what needs that people have. One of the things that we are realizing is the fact that a lot of people actually don't have access to the internet. So when we build all these platforms, unfortunately, you're only engaging with a few people. And so really rethinking, how do we make open data available to the people who don't have access to data to the level that we usually expect in high-income countries? And then obviously training workshops and skill shares. So being able to go to civil society organizations, newsrooms, working with them over a period of time, and being able to embed skills into their communities so that they can actually take over and become data savvy to do the work that really matters to them. So this is where School of Data really sits, and we're just one player in the space trying to reduce this gap. So what about higher education? I think when I was invited to this panel, I was really trying to think about, okay, what does this really mean for higher education? Again, School of Data is just playing a small role. And I think higher education, education institutions being a major stakeholder in coming up with people who have an impact, have a key role to play. One thing I was asking myself, why do we even learn calculus sometimes in university? Whereas statistics is a very important and crucial aspect of this. One of the things that I see when we're training data journalists is the fact that they lack some skills that could make things easy for them. And I think educational institutions can play a key role by really giving people a taste of what can be done, preparing them before they become professionals, whatever career they go to. I think open data can play a role by creating that environment for them to test out things in the real world, as opposed to in the past. I know when I was in school, for me to get access to an even realistic, practical data set that didn't have errors in it would require me actually spending a lot of time and talking to specific departments. And I think the fact that we have open data now, we are actually getting more realistic data sets that allow students to be able to get their hands dirty and be able to learn skills and build expertise in different areas so that when they get out to the real world, it's easy for them to be data savvy to the point where they can start solving real problems. So I think in general, higher education has a role to play to make our students more data savvy. Data savvy being, the way I think about it, is making them comfortable to the point that they know that whatever challenge they face, at least they know where to go, how to approach it, and what are the limitations and the opportunities that exist within that. we think higher education can also help us create more tools. That collaboration will create more opportunities, because one of the truths is the fact that there aren't enough skilled data experts, and being able to create tools that make it easier and comfortable for people to engage with data is going to be important. And we also want to create more training programs. It would be great not only to have School of Data being the only training program that is engaged in civil society. As you can see, we're only focusing on advocacy groups, citizens, but it would be great to have more programs come up that can use a similar model, that can get people engaged, that can have programs for entrepreneurs. And I think in the long term, we just want data savviness to be the norm and not just the exception. So that's all from me. And if you have any questions, I'm sure we can answer that.
Thank you. Very on time as well. Yeah, spot on. Thank you very much. I thought, right, because we have a few minutes in hand, right, and this room is very warm. Just before we go on to the next section, we're going to have a panel over here, which will give us the opportunity for questions. But firstly, I think I'd very much like to thank all our expert speakers today one more time. And then if we give everybody a break, bathrooms are out there. Left or right will take you to fresh air, but remember to come back again. How long should we give them? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes? 10 minutes.
Let's say 10 minutes, because I was expecting to finish the presentations around 4:15, and it's not 4 years. So we're fine.
So we have 10 minutes.
Yeah, sorry for
So
that.
if we come back in here for
10.
for 10 for 15 minutes start, for quarter past start. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And I say fresh air out this way and like that. Yeah, you know the way. Don't go that door. It's the emergency exit. Yeah, I'd like to start.
You're streaming still.
Yeah.
I thought them you're still streaming, so I don't know what you're
Back in.
Good job, it was bloody controversial, wasn't it? Yeah?
I don't know.
Point about university.
That's not bad. I heard much worse.
Thanks very much. I'm leaving because I'm going to theatre this evening, so.
But yeah, everything is going to be up and running in the streets.
Oh, we're now back. We're now back live.
We're not back.
And for the last 5 minutes, I think we'll turn the camera around and point it at the audience. What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
You think that's fair? Okay. So
It's open.
Okay, I'd just like to again say thank you. Oh, where's the camera over there? Hang on, I should stand over here, shouldn't I? No, I don't got my back to anybody. No, where do I stand? I don't know. Okay, I'm going to stand off. Again, I'd just like to say thank you for all our expert speakers today, and thank you for those of you that are still here. Football's not started yet, it's tomorrow, it's Saturday. Today's Friday. I'd just like to say that I've picked up a lot already. I actually had a deadline for a book chapter on knowledge production in the modern society. I didn't really know what to write about. It was for the School of Study of Education in the University of Guadalajara, which I gave a talk at a few months ago. And I thought, I know, I'll talk about open access, open education resources, open access and open data. So I could have extended it a lot more. So when I limited myself to going from a circle from the Enlightenment in Europe, in European universities in the 18th century, and going back to this idea about scholarship based on reproducible evidence and argument and documented sources and blah, 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 blah. Oh, let's make everything open, and open education resources are wonderful. Let's make the data open itself. And actually, let's have linked open data as well, so we have all these systems that will talk to each other. And I really wish the deadline for that book chapter was next week. But what I'd like to do, because the speakers very true to form, ran through to time, very good, so we have a little bit more time. But one of the reasons for that is because I didn't give them a big introduction, because I know some familiar faces, but I don't know you all well enough to actually introduce you. So that's why we got through it quicker. So we saved an extra 5 minutes of this slot. So before we start the discussion, if we could quickly go around and just introduce yourselves to me and to the audience. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Simon Nani. I'm in the Department of Information Studies, which is the building behind this one, but I forgot where Medaware was, and I went the other way to the Darwin building and walked all the way back. So I'm the next block over, and I got lost. I'm in the Department of Information Studies, and I'm Associate Director for our Centre for, I want to say something else, but for Digital Humanities here at UCL. And I've been involved in open education for some years now. And that's my purpose for being here, I think. And I think open data is great, and I want to hear from you guys. Okay. So if we could quickly go around the table, I'm going to sit down and keep quiet now.
So no one wants to start.
The cameras, yeah, you're on just about on camera, I think. I'm off camera, you're on camera.
No, you are blocking me.
I think actually the wide angle is going to catch the side of me in the end of the day. Okay, how's that? and I can do this and things like that. I'm still blocking. Okay, shall I come back? No.
Yeah, no, you're out. No, you're right.
Well, thank you. I'm Santiago. As I have told, I'm working for UCL Libraries. My background is in cinema, television, and librarianship. So it's a quite weird mix.
I'm Leo Havman. I'm a learning technologist at Birkbeck, around the corner from UCL, and I also do some sort of community organizing of groups such as M25 Learning Technology Group and LSIG Local London Group, which is a group that looks at learner experience research. And in the more kind of recent years, I've also been doing quite a bit of research in open educational resources and open educational practices. And really open data wasn't something that I realized that I was interested in until I started doing research on it.
So I'm Fabrizio Scriolini. I'm the lead researcher of the Latin American Open Data Initiative. And what we do is to explore the value of open data in Latin America. My background basically comes from transparency and accountability. That's where my world came from. By training, I would say I'm a public policy / lawyer guy, but that seems like ages ago.
I'm Mo Rubinstein. I'm currently the Open Knowledge International Community Coordinator, which is trying to coordinate a lot of communities, trying to help also the Open Education Group. But I'm also from Israel, and I'm an activist of open data in Israel at night. Sounds like a lot of stuff to do with open data. Yeah, but this, and I'm the co-chair of the Open Data Measurements Group at the IODC, International Open Data Conference. Yes.
Hi, my name is David Selassie Poku. I am with Open Knowledge International. I am the Africa lead for Open Data for Development team. My background is in biology and computer science, machine learning, but I think from that background, really understanding that there needs to be a human connection, and so working to see how we can get people to have access to resources to be able to consume data to do whatever they want. And currently, I'm just really exploring how different people across the continent are using open data, what challenges are they facing, and what opportunities exist.
Hi, I'm Carla Bonina. I'm currently a lecturer at Surrey Business School, and I work at the Surrey Center for Digital Economy, and also research associate at ILDA, at the Iniciativa Latinoamericana por los Datos Abiertos. I've been working, I'm a social scientist, and I look at technology from a social angle. I've been working in the intersection of innovation, ICT policy, and more recently entrepreneurship for the last 10, 12 years, working a lot with government and government innovation. So open data, I've been working with that for the last 2 or 3 years already. And I have a very strong interest in Latin America, so I do a lot of research there as well.
Hi, I'm Tim Coughlin. I'm a lecturer in the Institute of Educational Technology at the Open University. So our role is really to drive innovation in how the Open University uses online learning. And a lot of that is based in open education. Actually, part of our remit is to provide free learning, and we do that through Open Learn platform, as well as other initiatives. So a lot of my work revolves around OER. My actual background in computer science, but in human-computer interaction, so the study of people and their needs. So yeah, that's me.
And I'm Javiera. I work for the School of Management here at UCL, and I also co-coordinate the Open Education Working Group of Open Knowledge. So yeah, I'm kind of split into organizations. I do lots of research about open education practices in general. I work with Leo, just kind of partner in crime. We keep publishing things. We've gone through the deep root of open access, open publishing, open data. So we're trying to make our research as transparent as possible. Santiago kind of worked as publisher for a book, and we was using open fonts, for example, and open source software for editing. So we tried to make things as open as possible. And we just decided with Clive, Clive is not here today, and Simon to try to launch the Open Education Special Interest Group in UCL. So if you are part of UCL, please join us next Friday. It's going to be just a chit chat and a conversation around the table, present, past, and future of OER at UCL. Yeah, I do and help in events like this every now and again. That's it.
I'd like actually to add that Javiera recruited me for this event and did all the hard work in organisation. I don't know if you did everything, but certainly everything that I saw came from you anyhow.
Santiago too.
And Santiago as well, well done. Thank you very much. And also for the event next week. So please do come along as well. But we'll turn it over to the audience now. We've heard a lot from the speakers. There was a lot of informal discussion going on when I left and came back in the room. Is there anything anybody would like to pick up with one of our speakers? Yes, please.
This is for all of you, actually. I think I'm an anthropologist, and the work that I do around academic practice and the ways that people get and use information for their academic work, there's an awful lot of discussion around how do people get the resources they need and if you put something online, is that the same thing as giving people access to it? So very much to the points that you were making. So I'm wondering what the larger role of infrastructure challenges, particularly in countries that don't have all of the resources that we do in the US and the UK to just sort of get online and find this stuff, right? So in a situation like in some parts of Mexico, like in some parts of Zambia where I've been doing some research, where the assumption is for some of the people who are providing the data, well, we put it online. And they think that means, well, you can get it. But no. So I'm wondering what are sort of the ethical obligations around open data? If we're encouraging people to use open data, either as an OER or in terms of public policy advocacy, what is the role that we should play in making arguments for infrastructure so that that is actually a feasible thing to do? Because if we just say, well, we put it online, but they can't get online, that's not actually giving it to them.
When you say we put it online, what do you mean? In those contexts or just here?
And any context. I hear it in a variety of academic and also public. I mean, the Excel sheets that you were talking about, right, where you have to click 15 times. They probably said, well, it's out there, as if that's access. And so it means a variety of things depending on who you talk to.
I can take this. So again, I call them low-income countries, markets, places. And I think redefining what publishing or producing data really means, not from just putting data sets out there in this kind of generic context that we think about, right? Usually tends to be like high-income markets. But for instance, if you're going to publish something in Ghana, for instance, you need to understand what does that really mean for the person who's going to consume it, who's going to use it. So if that means that you have to go the extra step and make sure that they do have access to internet, that doesn't cost them money, then that's what it has to be defined. And maybe even we can define an index that says that if you publish data in a specific country, given the economic structure of the country, it has to not only be just online, but structures and infrastructure have to be put in place to make sure that anyone who needs to access it can access it. And that's what I really think. Yeah.
I also don't agree with the assumption that in the UK or the US the data is published in an accessible way.
No, it's problematic.
It's everywhere. Like in the index, what we've done this year compared to years before is that the G8, for example, the Open Data Charter G8 is defining data sets as big data sets. Like we need crime data sets, we need transportation data sets. But what do you need in transportation data sets in order to make this use? What do you need? And it's not even about where you put them, but what specific metadata you need in order to build this infrastructure. I don't know if you know about Sprint 16 and the GDS. That was a big, so GDS, Government Digital Services here in the UK, every year they have a showcase of what they're going to do. And infrastructure was a big thing over there. And when it comes to data publishing, it's even like, how can you even make it sustainable? Like, so we're speaking low income country of what, like, it's only on the internet. How do you actually make sure that you publish every year? How do you actually make sure that people can find it and discover it easily? Because it can be on an open data portal, but like as Fabrizio said, if a tree falls in the forest, like if it's there and you can't, so and we're thinking about it and we see that it's not sustainable. We need to think very, very creatively. Maybe this is the academy like opportunity to think how to make it discoverable, how to make people to use it. And it's a lot also about skills. And we speak about it. You see the UK government, I really recommend you to go to the GDS blog, and see what they write there about infrastructure and discoverability. And they're always looking for feedback as well. I found them very interesting to work with. They're very open for that. So if you're working in the field.
Yeah, and we cannot escape, some macro factors that operate around the open data field, if you want. So I come from the most continent in the world. Not the poorest, but the most unequal. And I often say this to people who look like, well, yeah, I mean, like essentially people who might not have access to the internet, while other people might be living in Switzerland, and that happens essentially, around the corner. So that's, problematic because you said, well, this guy lives in Switzerland, but the other guy, and so you cater for, if you want, for different audiences. And as a result, that creates an issue which we try to address in our research about what we are increasingly calling trusted intermediaries. So who do we need to engage with particular civil society groups, particular stakeholders in a neighborhood, whoever is there, how are we going to deal with them something that's meaningful for the use of data that they need? Like, there are some examples, a few of them, of people that are not a bunch of techno-utopians thinking that the next platform is going to reshape the world as we understand it. And I come strong on this, not because I don't believe in the power of innovation and ideas and so on, or markets to reshape some things. It's just that when you have that kind of reality, no platform is going to change that. Yeah. You know, like, it's not happening. And it will take a significant amount of investment and time to get these people internet access, to get these people series, to get the people very basic things. So no platform are going to do that. Like, no, Google is not going to deliver that. And so my question there is, how are we going anyway to reap some benefits out of the open data field for them to self-organize, for them to essentially advocate, for them to engage? And that's where I guess that this work, that way the School of Data, and by formalizing a bit more what we're doing here and reaching out these particular audiences, can yield some value for those that are effectively excluded from this field.
But also from the education point of view, when you look for open educational resources, most of the production is made in English. So, and there are very little tools or software that allow you to subtitle something that the software has an interface in Spanish, for example. So the delivery of software for analyzed data that is coded or only written in English, so all the instructions inside the software are in English only. The data sets are just in English. The OER and the videos that explain how to use that software are just in English. So it's also a language barrier that not affects just developing countries, but the rest of Europe. When I was trying to look for tutorials on how to use certain software in Italian, there is no way. There is no automated translation for how to use a specific open tool. Most of the OER are produced in English. So if I want to teach in Spain, I'm not going that far away. If I want to teach in Chile, if I want to teach in Peru, I need a software that allows me to put subtitles, but that software also operates in English. So it's the interface of the openness that needs to be also extended to all the languages. Yeah.
Why is that? That seems like an opportunity to me. I mean, it's not just English. We've got lots of people there who aren't English, in which hackers and computer programmers and translators work. Why aren't people getting on that case and doing something about that?
I don't know. I think Lorna Campbell, who's a great scholar in the openness, defined, and with Leo, Leo also is one of the people that coined this definition of like openness works as silos.
Openness what, sorry?
Well, I think Leo can explain it better.
It was something I mentioned earlier about how you have sort of open movements that are operating often with quite similar visions of how the world can be a better place through openness, but yet working in silos that don't really interact very much with each other, which is quite odd when you're so open.
Yeah, so all the people that translate for Wikimedia, because all the articles are translated openly and for free, also need to get engaged in translating software, in translating OER repositories. Most of the OER repositories are only searchable in English, and the same with open data repositories. So it needs to be kind of bringing the silos together and working together to contribute in translation. I think this is what we're missing a lot.
But we also see this problem with Wikimedia. We have this assumption that everything is translated, but if you look at the geography of Wikimedia, which was done at the Oxford Internet Institute, you actually see that it's unequal completely. Like Africa is completely off the map. There are languages in Europe that are like really, really small. Arabic is not as developed. So we have this assumption. And it's also, let's be honest, like the technology world is led by white English-speaking male. Like, I'm sorry to say it like this, but this is the truth. Like if we look at Silicon Valley. So when we're speaking about the openness thing, like there's beautiful work that is done in Latin America. And I wouldn't know anything about it if I wouldn't learn Spanish. So thank you guys, but like, because they're very welcoming. We don't know that, but the Latin American community is very welcoming. But like, it's also, I can totally understand. In open knowledge, we have this problem getting blog posts, because to send a blog post in English to someone who is speaking Arabic is actually pretty hard. As a Hebrew speaker, for me to write a doc in Hebrew will take, I think, half of the time that it will take me to write it in English, like cognitively. And we don't have sometimes even the money to translate these blog posts to transfer the knowledge, rather than just put something on a Transifax, which is a program to translate applications and putting forward. So it's something to think about also how to take it. And if you want another reference, there is a book named Coding Places that look at this open space community in Brazil, and the problem that they have with connecting with other coders in the English-speaking world in order to translate their work. So there is something to think about. Maybe we should do open translations.
Well, I think that two interesting examples that are quite key on understanding why the open world works separately was Ebola. Lots of papers in English about Ebola, then lots of software developed to help people in English again, then videos to talk about hygiene and working with Ebola, and the doctors speak French. The doctors and the nurses speak or either African languages or French. So nobody could, so some French speakers did great videos and they had a huge impact. And the same with the Zika virus. Zika virus is happening in Latin America. Do you think the doctors and nurses and medical professionals in Brazil, Colombia need your papers in English? No, they don't. They might. They might have a huge impact factor. Your metrics will be brilliant. Who's going to read it? Who's going to really take advantage of it? I think that's the question on the open movement, including open access, open education, open research, open science, open software, open data. Anyone else? any other open?
Open all hours.
Open warehouse, yeah.
Absolutely right. This whole issue of openness and the ways in which we define it. And just to pick on a couple of things that came up there is, yes, absolutely, that the material has to be in open format that you can read. This is one of the issues with OERs, with my first introduction to openness. It's all in PDFs, which is not open at all. All our material is released, yes, in a PDF, but also in open document format and things like this. And then also people need to be able to access it. The panel I was in the conference on scholarship and education in Mexico, the speaker following me that was doing research on the infrastructures in high schools in Mexico. And the one school she went to, the school had one computer. It was in the headmaster's office that was locked all day. So none of the students there had access to that at all. But coming back, if I can, to the data and making the data available, I'm just going to end right up this bit on a slightly ironic note, because I have a class with my students on data protection and freedom of information. In the UK, you can put in a freedom of information. And one of the reasons that they can give you for not responding is that that data is publicly available online. It is buried so deep in a data set that is stuck up there in the public domain somewhere that you're never going to find the information you want. So unfortunately, there is a lot of material out there released as open data that is obscure purposely. No names mentioned.
Yeah. Can I just speak on anyone else wanted to make a point? Otherwise, I would like to follow up on this and maybe then Rosita. And something that we were just discussing a while ago, but I think it's very important, one of the points you make, because I'm very interested in open practices. And many times I'm really struggling, or even, I feel a bit unease with the definition of openness and the emphasis it's been put, again, with this discourse of international development, very much what you're describing in, English and many other things, and very much patronizing thing on if it doesn't have a license, therefore it's not open. And you see, these are problems with indexes that I just think they're wrong. And so this idea of, if it's a PDF, it's not open. Well, you probably have seen as an anthropologist that people can do a lot of things, especially in education, with PDF. I'm not saying that,
let's forget about licenses. I think that's important. If he has a license, it's great, and if it's machine readable and so on, it's great. But I think we're slightly changing, the focus of the conversation too much on this, copyright culture and the things that had to be put in place, because there are a lot of different infrastructure in different countries that are driving the openness movement. So I really think that we have to really think much more broadly in terms of what openness means. And again, for me, it's social, it's environmental, it's of course the legal, the technical part that I would say it's a lot of emphasis at the moment. And so when I see practices in Latin America and in Africa, we're much more collaborative than many of what is happening in this country. I call that much more, an open culture. And again, all discourse has been, shaping the way that these poor countries or unequal countries are not that open because they don't have these requirements that are driven by a certain context. So in that sense, I think it's also a lot of responsibility in, how the discourse is being shaped. And I'm interested in that.
Hi, thank you very much to the organizers for opening this discussion. I'm coming from LSE where I finished the PhD there. And thank you also to all the speakers. And I don't know if I hope I'm not being unfair, but perhaps the reflections of the speakers apart from, in a sense, the concern between the distance, as I think David said, the distance or the gap between the open data and the users of that data, right? And also how to encourage or how to facilitate the use of this data. If we see this as a process, what I found that is lacking, and I wonder what your thoughts are, is kind of going before that. In a sense, it seems to me that we are already departing from the data. Since the data is there, how can we use it? And I guess that's one of my concerns always, is this, since I think with the big data movement and so on, this almost non-questioning of the relationship between data and reality, and therefore, okay, we have data, how can we use it? And I would like you to hear your thoughts about where is this coming from, and perhaps even on the open data index. I wonder if if in that index, something that you might analyze, I wonder if that's the case, is where is this data coming from? What is the data that is there and the one that is not there? And how this has an effect on them, how this use of the data has also further effects. I see it like a domino effect, right? And in a sense, it links, I think, what Santiago was saying about data mining, which would be the next part. Yeah, so I'm referring to data construction. So first of all, I think that the first step is this data construction, how it's being constructed, by whom, for what purposes, what is the quality, and so on. Secondly, there is the data mining that you were saying, and I completely agree. This data mining, you said, is deterministic and blind to unknown data. Yeah, what's happening with this data that is not even there? And also how this can lead to discrimination. And for example, I think there were several examples given that had to do with using open data to, for example, making possible for people to know the performance of the schools, performance of others. And there is lots of discussion about kind of also the dangerous effects of these performativity indexes. And in a sense, to what extent, when we are talking then about open data, we are not encouraging these practices that are not always so positive in it, even if we depart from a very good will and a very positive sense of doing good things. But at the same time, there are all these dangers, in a sense, that I think that need to be considered and that come before all this. What can we do with the data? They come before that. Where does this data come from, and how are we using it, and what's the quality of this data?
I think.
Yeah, I suppose just from my perspective, I mean, turning it around a little bit, getting any engagement with that raw data is a step forward because people will see the flaws in it. I mean, just from my own examples, which is kind of minor in terms of the big things you're talking about, but if students are actually looking at raw data about a system, then they see the flaws and the complexities of how that data is collected. So in the car parks, it has errors because of the way that it senses a car coming in and out of the car park. So even at that simple level, the students could see Sometimes the data suggested that there were more cars in the car park than spaces, things like that. So on a sort of positive tone of what you're saying, which I think is really important, at least if they engage with the raw data, they can pick out those flaws. I think that's something to be said for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I do agree with you, the fact that it's not about really emphasizing only who is consuming the data. I think there's a need to also go to the who's producing the data. I think what my point was that we shouldn't focus too much or only on the fact that we need to produce data, right? There's a need to also think about, if we want open data to be useful, somebody has to be using it. And are we making sure that they can actually access it? And the good thing about making sure that these two kind of separate parties are working in tandem or have the skills to do what they need to do is that if you have more people consuming data, then it means that if there are mistakes or errors or data that does not exist, they can actually ask for it. So in some of the trainings that we've done, when we've trained journalists to become data-driven, data savvy, they actually end up asking, why don't I have access to this particular data set to report this story? And that way, that puts pressure on the government or public institutions to release that. So I think I do agree with you. I just wanted to point out the fact that we shouldn't forget the other side, which is the data consumers.
I also think that as a movement, we evolved. So at the beginning, there were a lot of data sets, and we told government, give us the low-hanging fruits. Like, we want every data set that it's easy. And now we are transforming as a movement of civil society and data users, and we say, wait a minute. Like, this is actually not data set that we need. Like, put them out there, maybe one day someone will use, or put them out there, we can tell you that we're missing data or that they're missing metadata that we need, and then to move forward. And that feedback loop is really important. And I think we haven't put, when it comes to government data, open government data, we try to make feedback mechanism for the OGP and through other types of program. And we still have to figure out how to do that. Because even how many people actually give feedback on the data sets? Like, let's think about that. Like, how many people actually can go to the data portal and write to the government, wait, guys, this was not updated for like a couple of years. And we see that it doesn't happen. So it has to be some kind of I think you need to care really, really much about the data that you use in order to give feedback about it and go forward. So in the index, for example, one of the stages was, as I said, to define data. We find it very, very difficult when we're defining data with governments and also with users. How do we decide that we're defining one data better than the other? How do we we had it with health data, was inspired by Uruguay. Like, how do we decide what we want to data to health quality? Do we want numbers of beds? Do we want to look at reports? Do you want to look at contagious diseases? Like, what do we want to look at? And we also have a problem as a movement sometimes to define what we want, because there's so much data out there, and we need to know what the needs. And it's like all together. This is why if someone can measure use, that would be great for us. But at the moment, we're like a bit of stuck with it.
Doesn't matter of transparency in the way this is done. So when you collect data, at the very minimum, there should be a metadata file that tells you basically how this was done. Now, in this stage in where we are, some people are able to provide that, some people are not able to provide that, so you are just happy with the data you get. So that helps transparency and also the handling of the data. And that in the apps I show and in the work we have done over there, most of the stuff is supported under open source. So at the very minimum, you get to know what kind of algorithms were run through this data to get the results you actually got, which increasingly it's a sort of problem. Public data is something that we can all play with potentially, or with some skills, knowledge, etc. That's, we can all mine public data, but when you are mining my data, that may be a bit more problematic. And I know people do that to my data, and I'm not particularly comfy about that. So that leads us to a bit of an ethical framework in which this sphere, which is the open data sphere, but a larger sphere, which is the big data sphere, actually need to come a bit closer, I guess.
Yeah, for me, it's, again, back to the pedagogy of using open data and why. How do we teach research methods, for example? We give the students a book of research methods, and then we make them read papers with research methods, and they have to reach the methodology of a paper to understand how an experiment was conducted. Instead of showcasing different types of methodology, giving them the data and help the students to find by themselves how result was obtained, how is the process, how the methodology is constructed. And I think this is when we're thinking on adopting open data for teaching and learning. It needs to be contextualized. First year, research methods 101. Instead of using the book of research methods, quantitative, qualitative, the book, the holy book of research methods, we all have a chosen one. Try to get some chapters, get some step-by-step guides, look at what School of Data is doing, and tell the students, hey, you're gonna learn research methods all the way from here's your data, that's the methods you have to use. Because normally what happens with students is it's about literacy and data and writing or developing their own skills. First day at new job, oh, this is spreadsheet and I need a report. How are they going to do the report? If they don't have, or they don't know the techniques to write a report, they might be able to write a very plain, dry report, or they may use data journalism techniques to tell the story behind that data. So for me, it's like, it's not just about the data, it's about the stories we construct using that data, what really matters in education.
I also don't think any of us would imply that there is certain neutrality of data. That's absolutely not the case, and perhaps that's something that should have been mentioned much more clearly there. And of course, it's the part of the publishing. I do think it's important, and there are many biases happening there. But I do agree with you. That's a very powerful point that at least now, because of the reuse or the engagement and many of the things that you mentioned, people are really able to tell, hey, you're just telling me this is maybe unfair and true, it's not transparent. I think you're just perhaps opening also the possibility to more scrutiny. And what I've seen more and more, it's just, I mean, we need to have better debates on the ethics of data. And that's something that is missing, perhaps because you hear a lot of much more this advocacy. Oh, now we have data everywhere, and so let's create lots of things. I'm very concerned, for example, who benefits from data. I'm more and more seeing that, yeah, open for whom? I mean, taxpayers subsidizing big companies that have great potential, I mean, great power to process this data that is not the same as me sitting in my desk. So I think, you know, these kind of issues in who benefits from data, who's paying for open data, are not very much at the debate at the moment. Those are really important issues. I don't think you can separate or go one step before that. When I talk to many public servants, they're so scared that, you know, they're really willing to open up, and you I mean, I do believe them. They're so scared of the misuses that, you know, we would just not open that, because what if someone uses this to track people, and that's, you know, the app tracker. I mean, there's been many of these apps, you know, that have been used by evil purposes. So I think that's the case with any technology. But I do agree that we need to reflect much more those aspects. I mean, more critically than, you know, we're all focusing on how all of this is brilliant and so good, it's going to liberate us, you know, because it's open.
I think the why a data set has been collected is quite interesting, because it's not often, not necessarily clear, but often these data sets were collected for one purpose, and that informs how the data was collected and everything else. And then you might be saying, well, it's open, I'm going to use it for another purpose. And that sort of parallels some of the issues with OER, in that we talk about metadata being necessary to understand why an educator made a certain resource, what learning goals they had, or whatever. But you've always got this translation of trying to say, well, actually, I want to use this for something else. And as you say, it might not be actually correct for that use, or you might interpret it in the wrong way.
Felipe from the University of Manchester. I'm also researching on open data, and as much of the advocates of open data, I also think that can, like shape or reshape our institutions that create better economies and improve governments and so on. But something that I'm wondering about is like the World Bank report about the digital dividends that was launched a few weeks ago talks that actually during the 90s people thought that technology could reshape the world, and what they realize right now that actually technology is subordinated to existing institutional arrangements. So basically technology will produce more outcomes or impact in countries with, I don't know, like better regulated markets or more better democracies. So just thinking, what are your thoughts about what can we do with open data in order to avoid that it follows the same path of other technological, I don't know, like innovations in order to avoid, like this issue with institutions? What do you think?
I mean, I guess I would just respond to say that that's why I think it's important to have engagement with this going on in education, so that you are putting that some of that power to understand what this data is, and critically analyze it and comment on it and feedback on it into the hands of ordinary citizens, because I think that it's not that easy to do those things without some kind of grounding in sort of what these data sets mean and how to access them and how to interrogate them. So that's the why of the open data as OER, I guess.
I haven't looked at that report yet, but that reminds me of the digital divide many years ago. That I think it was also by the World Bank saying that of course you can just put in a graph that you're closer. I mean you have better infrastructure in richer countries, and therefore you cannot do much because that's all about institutions and surroundings. And I did a simple, I remember that was my master's dissertation to show that that was actually not the case. I mean, it is also coming from, I think, something related to what I said before. It's a lot of things that actually happen in Latin America, but it's also this, international development discourse that is, guys, you cannot do anything because actually, you're always going to be lagging behind. And I do have my doubts on that, but I also don't believe technology is going to solve anything, as you were saying before, just by itself. But I also think as part of this, reinforcing international development discourse. Yeah.
Yeah, and the digital dividends, I read part of it, like the summary plus a couple of chapters dealing mostly with openness and so on, and the argument being, well, you cannot escape also creating monopolies, and the internet favors the creation of new monopolies, and as a result, this traps countries in a different kind of logic. Now a global monopoly, if you want, on a particular thing. And that said, I guess that the way to do this is again a broader picture of how these open movements actually engage with local and regional context. It's not the same to engage in Latin America with issues of inequality that it will be in Asia or other places. So that's the only way, I guess, is to reflect on their own. And in education, I think it's very obvious that you need to target on what people actually want or needs in the setting. And maybe it's not open data, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's basic literacy in some parts of the world, right? But in other parts, you might still catalyze people in the field and able to essentially deliver on a larger development outcome. But that said, like much of tracking this impact, it's problematic. Some of the stuff that happens in these reports is like you wonder how some of the stuff actually got into measure in the way they was measured. So, and I think also for the open data field, it's early days. Like, we have been talking about open data like the whole thing kind of evolved in the last
10
6, but internationally maybe 5 years, 6 years. So so to set a baseline, basically to say, well, this is where we are now, and then in the future, that's going to take a bit of more time. I think this is still in the infancy. So people come from international organizations, some of them very metrics oriented, and ask you like, well, what are the results? I mean, are we making billions of dollars out of that? Like, well, you know, that no, maybe not yet. I mean, I don't know. Some people are making money out of it, but I'm not sure we have an open data, or I know we have a data market, but as open data per se, I'm not sure essentially which business models are going to evolve so far.
Maybe that's not the point.
And maybe we are not doing it for the profit, because maybe you are essentially building public infrastructure for other things to essentially evolve with you. But hey, I'm just an academic.
Nobody here is driving a Maserati.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the big issues that has been skirted around here, is that working in academic institutions, we perhaps don't have that profit motive, but as pointed out, this data is available for companies to make money out of, and thank you, because we need reminding about that. We are really looking at making our research data available, and we figure, well, nobody's going to make any money out of our research data, but you're absolutely right. We are, as users of mobile technology, generating huge amounts of data on a daily basis, which is used for marketing, it's used for all types of analysis for big companies. And actually, I'm going to stop there, because I guess we could go on and on about that for another half an hour. But we're out of time now, so I think it'd be very nice to thank our speakers, and then I guess we're off to the pub.
Yeah, off to the pub.
So before we do that, before we thank the speakers, just to remind everybody that we do have the launch event next Friday.
Yes.
And we will be going to the pub.
Very
After that as well, and we're going to the pub again today. And we should thank all our speakers for coming and talking to us today. Thank you very much. And a thank you for our audience as well.
Yay!
Stop the recording. Yes, stop. Click and stop recording.